welcome to the next hearing. I am Amod, and today we will discuss the three-layer state: political power, administrative power, constitutional power. Let's begin with a simple claim. If you can understand how India actually works, you immediately separate yourself from 99% of people who only understand how India talks. We love debating the government. We love arguing about politics. We love shouting about institutions. But almost nobody studies the state. And once you see the state clearly, its layers, its negotiations, its contradictions, everything else falls into place. So here's the frame. In reality, the Indian state runs on three layers: political power, deciding; administrative power, implementing; constitutional power, arbitrating. This is the closest thing we have to the Republic's operating system. It's not written anywhere, but it explains everything. Let's go layer by layer. Chapter 1 of this lecture is about the political layer: decision, mandate, momentum. Political power is often misunderstood. People think politics is about ideology, speeches, and charisma. That's just the theater. Real political power is the ability to take decisions that survive resistance. Political power sets direction, not detail, direction. Let's discuss how political power decides. A political leader doesn't pick between hundreds of options. He picks between three. Do we pursue this? Do we postpone this? And do we abandon this? Every major political decision in India boils down to that triad. Think of GST. NDA chose to pursue it. UPA postponed it for years. Earlier governments abandoned similar proposals altogether. The political layer frames the intent of governance. A political decision is not just a policy. A decision is a bet, a policy is the translation, and implementation is the result. Political decisions announce direction, but they don't execute it. Let's take a well-known example: Swachh Bharat Mission. The decision was political. The execution was administrative. The interpretation of rights, environment, public health, constitutional. The success wasn't because of the decision alone. It was because the other two layers aligned. Political power runs on three fuels: mandate, narrative, organizational machinery. Mandate gives legitimacy, narrative gives direction, organization gives control. Without all three, political power becomes symbolic. Let's discuss the case study of the 1991 economic reforms. This is the perfect example of political courage meeting bureaucratic expertise. The political decision was shock therapy, devaluation, liberalization, deregulation, but the details were shaped by insiders: Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Rakesh Mohan, Y.V. Reddy. And constitutional power ensured that reforms didn't violate fundamental rights or federal autonomy. 1991 wasn't a political event, it was a three-layer synchronization. Next part of this lecture is about the administrative layer, the machine behind the curtain. Now we enter the layer most people misunderstand: the bureaucracy. If political power chooses the destination, administrative power decides the speed, the route, and sometimes whether the journey happens at all. Bureaucracy is not one entity, it's a mosaic. IAS, IPS, IRS, IFS, state services, regulatory bodies, district level machinery, technical cadres, permanent staff in ministries, autonomous boards. Each has its own incentives, anxieties, and turf. Administration has three hidden powers. 1. Power of delay. 2. Power of delusion. 3. Power of definition. The public rarely sees this. The power of delay, a file that moves slowly, is a form of resistance, often more effective than outright refusal. The power of delusion, a policy can be watered down so subtly that the political layer doesn't even notice. The power of definition. The bureaucracy decides what counts as compliance, public interest, urgent, feasible, practicable. These definitions reshape the real policy. Now let's discuss a case study: the Aadhaar project. Aadhaar is not a political achievement alone. It is a bureaucratic triumph. Nandan Nilekani gave vision, political leaders gave backing, but it was the UI/DAI mission team, dozens of anonymous technocrats, who built the architecture. Every major success story in India is a political, Bureaucratic hybrid. Let's discuss the administrative culture. Indian bureaucracy is shaped by three words: precedent, procedure, protection. Precedent ensures continuity, procedure ensures control, protection ensures survival. This makes the system stable but slow. Now let's discuss when bureaucracy becomes the state. What happens? Sometimes the bureaucracy outlives governments. It has the memory, the files, the networks. Look at the police reforms debate, or land acquisition, or environmental clearances. Governments change, but the administrative logic stays the same. This is why political promises often die in silence. Now let's discuss the case study, the farm laws. Political power pushed a bold reform, but administrative networks lacked buy-in. State-level machinery resisted, and the constitutional layer intervened through petition pathways. The reform collapsed not because of politics alone, but because the three layers moved in opposite directions. The next part of this lecture is the constitutional layer, interpretation as governance. Now we reach the most misunderstood layer. Constitutional power is not the judiciary alone. It is an entire ecosystem of interpretation. Supreme Court, High Court, tribunals, constitutional bodies, regulators with quasi-judicial powers, Election Commission, CAG, NHRC, and even constitutional conventions. This layer decides meaning, and meaning becomes governance. Constitutional power doesn't execute, it authorizes. Every major political idea in India eventually lands on a judge's table. Reservation policies, economic reforms, social reforms, environmental regulations, technology and privacy laws, federal disputes, election practices, parliamentary privileges. When courts interpret, they create a new reality. One of the case studies about this is K.S. Puttaswamy, the privacy judgment. The government's argument was security and welfare. The petitioners argued dignity and autonomy. The court created a new constitutional right. This interpretation changed data protection, Aadhaar's framework, surveillance norms, and the digital economy. One judgment reshaped a decade of policy. Now let's discuss S.R. Bommai judgment. The judgment that changed federalism permanently. Political misuse of Article 356 was common. The court said enough. After Bommai, the centre's power shrank and states' power grew. That wasn't just a judicial ruling, it was a constitutional rebalancing. When judicial interpretation overrides political intent, this is where the friction appears. The political layer may pass a law with X intention, but the constitutional layer may interpret it to the mean Y. That Y becomes the new operating reality. This is not judicial overreach. This is constitutional design. Constitutional bodies act as power checkers. Election Commission, CAG, Finance Commission. These bodies shape political behavior without ever entering a campaign or cabinet meeting. Do it through signals, norms, and reports. That's constitutional power in its purest form. Next chapter of this lecture is about when three layers align. When political, administrative, and constitutional power move in the same direction, India accelerates. You saw this in the 1991 reforms, the Green Revolution, space and nuclear programs, infrastructure expansion from 2014, implementation, Aadhaar stack, Ujjwala, PMJDY election reforms in the 2000s, right to information, right to education rollout. When all three layers align, change becomes inevitable. The next chapter of this lecture is when the three layers collide. The slowest periods in Indian governance happen when the layers oppose each other. Conflict 1. Political versus administrative. Political wants speed, administrative wants stability. Example, urban infrastructure projects stuck in endless clearances. Conflict 2. Political versus constitutional. Political power passes a law. Constitutional power interprets or suspends it. Example, Section 66A of the IT Act, triple talaq petitions, environmental orders stopping projects, farm laws. Conflict 3 is administrative versus constitutional. Courts order something, bureaucracy implements selectively or slowly. Example, police reforms ordered in 2012 2006, still incomplete. Prison reforms pending across states. Now let's discuss the three-layer state. Battles, crises, and historical turning points. Let's move now from the anatomy of the state to its battlefield. Because layers of power are interesting only when they collide, and India has seen these collisions again and again in movements that defined our republic's character. What I am about to walk you through is not political history, it's a hidden negotiation between political power, administrative power, and constitutional power during crises where the Indian state was forced to reveal its true instincts. Let's begin. Next part of this lecture is about 1950, the Constitution takes its first blow. Barely weeks after the Constitution came into force, the state faced a shock. The Supreme Court in Ramesh Thapar and Brij Bhushan struck down state-level censorship orders. This was India's first collision between political desires and constitutional limits. Political layer said, maintain order. Administrative layer executed censorship. Constitutional layer intervened and said, not like this. This moment matters for one reason. It set the tone. The judiciary would not act like a British-era court. It would act like a constitutional court. The political class didn't see this coming. From here onward, the political layer realized something uncomfortable. They could control elections but not interpretation. And that became the first long-running tension in our state. Next chapter is about 1959, the Kerala crisis. The dismissal of the world's first elected communist government in Kerala was not just a president's rule story. It was a textbook three-layer negotiation. Political layer, the party in power wanted intervention. Administrative layer, intelligence reports, bureaucratic notes, and cabinet papers built the case. Constitutional layer, the governor became the pivot. A constitutional office used as an administrative instrument. Here's the thing most people miss. This was not about ideology. It was about the political layer using administrative machinery to create a constitutional justification. A perfect example of layers merging temporarily to achieve political outcomes through constitutional routes. This pattern would repeat for decades. The next chapter is about 1967, the judiciary strikes back. By 1967, the political power was at its peak. Then came Golnath. The Supreme Court declared that Parliament could not amend fundamental rights. This was an earthquake. Political layer furious, administrative layer caught in between waiting for the fallout, constitutional layer asserting supremacy through interpretation. Golnath was the judiciary saying, we are not the weakest branch. We are the branch that decides the meaning of every other branch. This wasn't a judgment. It was a strategic warning shot. Political power doesn't like being limited, and from here the battle escalated. Next chapter is about 1971 to 1973, the clash of legitimacies. The political layer struck back with the 24th and 25th Amendments. Then the Keshav case arrived. The largest bench in our history. This wasn't just law. It was a war over who gets to define India. Political mandate versus constitutional mandate. Elected legitimacy versus structural legitimacy. The basic structure doctrine emerged, but the real story is the aftermath. The supersession of judges in 1973 was not an administrative decision. It was a political message sent through administrative channels to the constitutional layer, meaning you can win the doctrine, but we control the appointments. This was the beginning of a Cold War that continues even today. Next chapter is about 1975, the emergency, when all three layers collapses into one. The emergency is the only moment when the three-layer model temporarily collapsed. Political power became absolute. Administrative power followed without resistance. Constitutional power retreated. But let's break it down more strategically. Political layer, triggered by fear of losing control. Administrative layer, used to implement censorship, arrest, sterilization programs, and surveillance. Constitutional layer, the ADM Jabalpur judgment showed complete surrender. The emergency is often taught as political authoritarianism, wrong. It is the only time the political layer fully consumed the administrative layer and bent the constitutional layer. This incident defines why checks and balances exist. It also explains why the judiciary later built doctrines that sometimes look overprotective. It was institutional trauma. Next chapter is about 1977 to 1984. Bureaucracy finds its spine. Post-emergency, something interesting happened. Bureaucrats realized one truth. Politicians come and go, but the file moves only when the administrative layer agrees. This period saw three bureaucratic assertions. 1. Independent-minded civil servants resisting political transfers. 2. Rise of systemic policy planning bodies. 3. Intelligence agencies gaining quiet autonomy. In simple terms, the administrative state used the political chaos to strengthen its long-term control. This is the decade where the bureaucratic layer became the permanent layer of the Indian state. Whether that's a good or bad is a separate debate, but it's a fact. Next chapter is about 1984 to 1991, the unstable republic. This period gives us a perfect case study of the three-layer tension. Assassinations, coalition politics, mandate reversal, security crisis, economic stagnation. Political layer was unstable. Administrative layer had to keep the country running. Constitutional layer became extremely interventionist. Take the Shah Bano case, classic three-layer tension. Judiciary gave a clear judgment. Political layer rejected it. Administrative layer had to mediate the fallout. The result: the political layer amended the law, but the constitutional layer responded years later with a new jurisprudence. This is how the Indian state talks to itself across time. Next chapter is about 1991, reform without constitutional amendment. The 1991 economic reforms are a masterclass. We often praise the political courage, but we ignore the deeper truth. Political layer created the movement. Administrative layer designed, drafted, executed, and defended the reforms. Constitutional layer allowed the shift without demanding amendments. Why? Because the reforms were done smartly, through executive action, not constitutional confrontation. This is the strategic lesson. When political and administrative layers are aligned, constitutional change is not always needed. The state can reinvent itself quietly. Next chapter is about 2004 to 2014, the rise of the civil society state. This decade brought a new player into the arena, public mobilization powered by civil society. Look at RTI, look at Anna Hazare, look at Lokpal, look at environmental jurisprudence. Political layer was forced to respond. Administrative layer found itself questioned. Constitutional layer amplified activism through PILs. This era marks the moment where citizens started influencing the three-layer state from outside the structure. The political class underestimated this shift, but the judiciary recognized it faster. For the first time, the constitutional layer acquired significant political influence through PILs and monitoring committees. This was judicial governance by necessity, not ambition. Next chapter is about 2014 to present, the era of centralized political power. This decade gives us the clearest case study for how a strong political layer reshapes the three-layer model. Political layer, highly centralized, highly disciplined. Administrative layer, tightly integrated, mission-driven, pipeline-oriented. Constitutional layer, assertive at times, restrained at other times. The outcome is fascinating. 1. Political power regained primacy. 2. Bureaucratic machinery became efficiency focused. 3. Judicial review shifted towards structural questions rather than micromanagement. But the real change is psychological. The political layer today communicates directly with the people, bypassing intermediaries. This reduces the distance between political legitimacy and constitutional legitimacy. Whether this strengthens or weakens the state is a question only history will tell and answer. Next chapter is about federalism under stress. Every major crisis, GST, Article 356 debates, farm laws, COVID response, exposes a deeper tension. Political layer wants national coherence. Administrative layer works through state level machinery. Constitutional layer protects federal balance. India's federalism works not because of perfect design but because each layer negotiates constantly. Sometimes it's cooperative, sometimes it's competitive, often it's controlled conflict. This is where the three-layer state becomes most visible. The next chapter is about the judiciary's self-transformation. Over the decade, the constitutional layer has reinvented itself multiple times. 1950s rights protector, 1970s structural defender, 1990s governance partner, 2000s social crusader, 2010s procedural purist, 2020s constitutional pragmatist. The judiciary is not static, it responds to how the political and administrative layers behave. If the political layer expands, the judiciary recalibrates. If bureaucracy oversteps, judicial oversight grows. If rights are threatened, judicial vigilance increases. The judiciary is not anti-state, it is a stabilizer of the state. Next chapter is about what these crises reveal about the Indian state. Step back and you will see a pattern. When political power becomes too strong, constitutional power asserts itself. When constitutional power becomes too ambitious, political power pushes back. When both fight, bureaucracy stabilizes the system. When bureaucracy dominates, both political and constitutional layers eventually reclaim space. India survives because no layer allows the others to dominate permanently. This is the real genius of our state. Not perfection, balance. Next chapter is about the invisible negotiation. Every crisis you have heard today proves one thing. The Indian state does not function on hierarchy, it functions on negotiation. Political decisions, administrative execution, constitutional arbitration. Three layers, one republic, constant conflict, constant correction, constant reinvention. This is why India's story is messy, unpredictable, and yet deeply resilient. Because power here is never in one hand for too long. Now let's discuss the three-layer state, the future, the philosophy, and the strategic blueprint. We have understood the structure, we have studied the battles. Now let's talk about what really matters, the future of the Indian state and the philosophy that must guide it. Because here is the truth, everything we discussed so far was about how India has behaved. This part is about how India must behave if we want a republic that is stable, ambitious, accountable, and future-proof. Think of this as a strategic blueprint, not for politicians, not for judges, not for officers, but for the republic itself. Let's begin. First chapter is over the next 25 years will not look like the last 75. We are entering a phase where the old assumptions collapse. Population age structure is changing. Technology is rewriting governance. Citizens are becoming impatient. Institutions are becoming overstressed. Political competition is becoming sharper. Federalism is becoming more transactional. Courts are becoming more cautious. Bureaucracy is becoming more specialized. The Indian state now faces pressures from all sides: economic, demographic, technological, strategic, and the three-layer model must adapt or it will break. The question is simple: do we drift into the future or do we architect it? Next chapter is about the coming power shifts. Let's map the next 25 years with clarity. 1. Political power will become more centralized, not less. Not because of ideology, but because governance demands speed. Fragmented authority cannot handle crises like pandemics, climate shocks, cyber warfare, or energy transitions. Citizens expect instant delivery. Political systems respond by centralizing. That's the direction we are moving in. 2. Administrative power will become more data-driven. Files won't decide outcomes. Dashboards will. The bureaucrat of the future is not someone who writes notes. It's someone who interprets data, evaluates risk, and executes with precision. This demands a new administrative philosophy. 3. Constitutional power will become more structural. The judiciary will step back from micromanagement and step deeper into structural questions, federalism, rights in digital spaces, environmental constraints, and institutional design. The quote of the future deals with systems, not symptoms. Next chapter is about the Republic needs a new constitutional imagination. Our constitution is stable, but our world is not. Digital rights, AI governance, biometric state capacity, data colonization, climate displacement, public finance, restructuring, migration, tech monopolies, none of these were in the minds of the framers of the constitution. So the philosophical question is simple. How does a 1950 document remain authoritative in a 2040 world? The answer is not amendment. The answer is interpretation. Constitutional power will have to evolve a doctrine for technological sovereignty, where dignity, autonomy, and privacy survive in a world of total data visibility. This is not a legal challenge, it's a civilizational one. The next chapter is about the future of each layer. Let's break down how each layer must evolve if India wants a stable and powerful state. Political power. The mandate must mature. The political class today controls ambition. Tomorrow, it must control complexity. This means three things. 1. Decisions must be long-term, not headline-driven. Climate, energy, migration, health systems, these require political leadership that thinks generationally. 2. Political communication must become educational. A mature state does not run on slogans. It runs on literacy. Citizens must understand the why behind decisions. 3. The political class must invest in institutional competence. Strong institutions help strong government endure. The future of political power is not domination, it's stewardship, administrative power, the age of specialized bureaucracy. The generalist model cannot handle the challenges coming. Cyber policy needs technologists. Health policy needs epidemiologists. Climate policy needs environmental system experts. Economic policy needs behavioral thinkers. The administrative state must shift from journalist muscle to specialist intelligence. And this shift is not cosmetic, it will redefine how policies are made, implemented, and evaluated. The bureaucracy of next 25 years must be leaner, faster, more accountable, more transparent, and deeply skilled. This is where India either rises or stagnates. Constitutional power, the era of structural safeguarding. The judiciary must take up 4 new roles. 1. Guardian of digital rights. As algorithms shape behavior, rights must evolve. 2. Referee of federal negotiations. Economic federalism will create future flashpoints. 3. Climate adjudication. Environmental jurisprudence will become constitutional jurisprudence. 4. Institutional integrity. The court will have to protect institutions, and even when political incentives don't. The judiciary remains stuck in case-by-case reasoning, it will be overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges coming. It must think in systems. The next chapter is about a strategic blueprint for the next 25 years. Let's get to the heart of it. The actual architecture India needs if it wants to become a stable, ambitious, sovereign republic in a turbulent world. Blueprint, Element 1. A harmonized state. The state cannot afford internal warfare between political, administrative, and constitutional layers. We need alignment without authoritarianism, coordination without collapse of autonomy. This requires 3 things. Political incentives aligned with institutional longevity, administrative capacity aligned with citizen experience, constitutional jurisprudence aligned with technological realities. The future depends on harmony, not hierarchy. Blueprint Element 2, the high capacity administrative state. If you track every successful nation in history, the story is the same. The countries that succeeded were not the ones with the best politics. They were the ones with the best administration. India must build an administrative blueprint based on mission-oriented teams, specialized capacity, performance metrics, risk prediction, and ethical clarity. The magic is not in policy, it's in execution. Blueprint Element 3, a constitutional doctrine for the digital age. The judiciary must lead a philosophical shift. Rights in a digital world cannot be understood with analog logic. We need a new doctrine that safeguards data dignity, algorithmic fairness, digital autonomy, and sovereignty over Indian data. This will be the defining constitutional debate of the next 30 years. If we get this wrong, we weaken the republic. If we get it right, we strengthen it forever. Blueprint Element 4, Deep Citizen Literacy. A republic succeeds only when citizens can understand power. Governments can make policies, courts can issue judgments, officers can write notes. But unless citizens understand the architecture of a state, the republic remains hollow. Civics education must evolve. Children must learn how power works, how institutions negotiate, how rights operate, how federalism functions. A republic is only as strong as the people who can defend it. Blueprint Element 5, Federalism 2.0. We must redesign how center and state works together. Not through confrontation, through contracts. Shared fiscal frameworks, shared investment visions, shared crisis management systems. Federalism must upgrade from political bargaining to national strategy. This is how India builds a 21st century state. The next chapter is about the strategy, the philosophy India needs. Behind every institutional design, there must be a philosophy. Here's the one I believe India needs for the next 25 years. A state strong enough to execute, wise enough to limit itself, and open enough to let the people shape the republic. Strength without wisdom becomes authoritarian. Wisdom without strength creates paralysis. Openness without structure becomes chaos. The republic must practice all three: strength, wisdom, openness. That is the golden triangle of a stable state. Now let's discuss what this means for you, the citizen. Let's move from the theory to agency. Your role as citizen is not passive. In the three-layer state, citizens are the fourth layer. You shape political legitimacy, you shape constitutional interpretation through public consciousness. You shape administrative behavior through pressure, data, and expectation. Three things you must do. 1. Ask deeper questions. 2. Hold power accountable without cynicism. 3. Understand that nation build is a slow, disciplined project. The state is a powerful, but the republic belongs to you. Let me leave you with the simplest summary of everything we have explored. Political power decides where India wants to go. Administrative power decides how fast we get there. Constitutional power decides whether the journey remains just. And citizens decide whether the republic remains worthy of its promise. If these four forces align, India rises. If they fight destructively, India slows. If one dominates permanently, India risks losing the equilibrium that kept us stable for 75 years. The future depends on our ability to build a state that is strong, fair, agile, and imaginative. This is the challenge. This is the opportunity. This is the responsibility. Thank you for watching this. If this helped you see India not as chaos but as a complex and intelligent negotiation of power, then this series did its job. In the episodes ahead, we will go even deeper into institutions, doctrine, political strategy, and administrative evolution, and the constitutional philosophy that must guide the new next era. The project continues, and so does the Republic. You are watching the next hearing, and I am Amod Bidhuri. Thank you.